All right, so we're going to get started. So first of all, thanks everyone for joining. We're really excited about the session today. We're going to talk about what you need to know before you buy construction technology, which is a pretty big topic and a question that we get often. So our guest expert today is Dane Pemberton. Thanks, Dane, for joining us. He's the U.S. Group Construction Technology Manager at BL Harbert. We're super excited to get his insights today. He's got a lot of knowledge to share. Additionally, we're joined by Amanda Wolf from our content partner Stack Technologies, and I'm Jess Stevens with Flashtract. So now we're going to get right into it. Amanda's going to kick us off with, sorry, I was going to show you our lovely photos and I didn't switch the slide. Apologies. Amanda's going to kick us off with the results from Stack's recent technology report. So Amanda, go right ahead.
Thanks, Jess. I'm really excited to be here. So Stack conducted our first annual pre-construction technology survey in the fall, and we released our report on the results earlier this year. I'm going to cover just a few of the really relevant statistics that we found related to this discussion. But first off, just wanted to say 56% of people reported an increase in project volume last year, even in the midst of COVID and all of the other challenges that went around with that. So that's great. And then we also saw 61% report an expectation that their business is going to grow this year. And most of the rest expected business to stay pretty steady. So just wanted to set the tone for some great news. Diving into some tech-related stats. So 77% of people reported that they believe software provides a strategic advantage for their company. And we often hear the narrative that the construction industry is the slowest to adopt tech and that sort of thing. And while there is a little bit of truth in that, it's also a lot more nuanced. So, construction professionals, as we know, are interested in tech and they do see the value in it. And in fact, when we asked people if they had all the software tools they needed to perform their jobs, 40% said yes, but there were other tools out there that they would like to have. And 26% actually said no, there are tools they're missing that are critical to success. So that's 66% saying that they want and need new tech. So if this is the case, what is stopping people from buying what they need? We actually got that answer, but on the next slide, I want to take a look at some existing workflow data first. So we asked about a huge variety of software tools, from takeoff and estimating to accounting to project management and all sorts of things. And the overwhelming consensus was really that folks are using a mashup of different tools to get the job done. So as you can see here, in general, we saw about half say that they use spreadsheets and 20% use pen and paper across the board. Now, we did let people select multiple responses to questions like this. So that kind of shows us that people are using these methods combined, some also along with some sort of software in there. But because of this kind of cobbled together workflow, we found that 32% of data on average is siloed and never leaves its original location. Another 32% of people are manually re-entering data between platforms, and an additional 30% are using spreadsheets to move data back and forth. So recognizing that tech is valuable, knowing that there's a lack of accessible data, the potential for rework and error in manual processes, all of these things combined, why aren't companies adopting tools to help speed up processes, reduce those errors, and make things easier and more efficient? So as you'll see on the next slide, for almost half, it comes down to a lack of time or resources. And for most others, the problem is really budget or resistance from employees or management. So we're going to be taking a look at each of these obstacles and kind of how you can address them in your own company. And I'll turn it back over to Jess.
Thanks, Amanda. That's great info. I learned a lot reading through the study, and we'll definitely be sending that out to everybody on the call today and linking to it in the follow-up post that we have about this webinar, because it's a great read and I think it resonates with a lot of folks in construction technology as well. So we're going to talk about these challenges specifically within which categories you need to evaluate. So we're going to start with fit, then we're going to move into budget, then time, and then we're going to wrap up with ROI because that's typically the biggest question that we get. So evaluating fit, I think the piece that I think is really important and that we often at Flashtract talk to our prospects about as they're coming to us with questions about, who we work with and things like that. You as the consumer are actually really capable of kind of evaluating existing users for a lot of these different technologies on the market. The nice thing about software programs, or I think most technology in general, you can find a lot of reviews online and do kind of your own diligence around the types of customers that they work with based on who's giving these reviews. My personal favorite website is Capterra because you're able to go through, read very visceral reviews from companies that are working directly with these products. You can see the company size, which I think is really important and relevant. So you can see who has a similar footprint to you and your office and what they're doing, maybe some of the pitfalls they're experiencing, what to watch out for, and that'll give you a good amount of ammunition going into these conversations with, some of these sales teams to say, well, I noticed that somebody at a company of my size was experiencing this particular thing. Tell me how you guys are working on that, or, help me understand what's going on there. I think that's a really good way to learn where you fit, especially if there are multiple options for the problem that you're trying to solve. You say you have 3 solutions. If one of them, if most of the reviews are coming from companies of your size, you're likely going to have a good experience there because that's their ideal customer that they work with and you'll fit better there. Secondarily, I think, and this one you have to take with a grain of salt, but a lot of companies will put together testimonial style videos of, some of their happiest customers or some of their most successful customers. I think those videos obviously are talking a lot about product features and they're talking about individual experience, but it also discusses why they chose that particular product. It often discusses, what kind of company they are, what their profile looks like. Again, it's helping evaluate that kind of specific fit to see who they're already working with. So, and that's an easy thing to do. Just a quick, you could do that in like 10 minutes. You don't have to get on the phone with anybody. It's an easy way to kind of evaluate where you want to go. So the next thing in this category is value match. And Dane actually has a lot of really great stuff to share here. So I'm going to let him jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think one of the things that, we do as a company and what I do with my group is first and foremost, before we, get too heavily involved in evaluating software or an application or technology that we think would benefit us is, one, establish, what are we need, what are our real needs? And so we sit down and go, okay, what are we trying to accomplish here? And then we look at that through the lens of our company's culture or our company's values. And that's one thing that's extremely important to us as a company, extremely important to me is, if a technology or a vendor doesn't align with where we think the direction of our company is going and what our real needs and goals are, then, it's probably not a good fit for us. And that is, honestly, it's important and more that we see technology hitting the market, you get some more variety, so you don't feel like you have to be handheld by one vendor necessarily. So I think it's a really important metric to include as you continue to, look for what technology makes sense for you, what you need for your company, or, your team, in whatever aspect that might be. So that's one of the big things, value match. I really can't stress that enough because people kind of undervalue that or they don't consider it. They just kind of look at, well, I'm buying tech and that's just tech. And it really doesn't have to be that way. One of the other things that we kind of really look for is after we establish, hey, there's some common values or this aligns with where we really want to go and how we want to lead tech and for our, teams in the field or for our company requirements. We look for internal team members that are motivated, capable of, implementing that software and making sure that we have enough of those internal champions that it will help it be successful. And if we get enough of them, then it's probably a good fit. And that's something we look for early on too. And we do all of this like early on, like super early on, like during discovery of just what systems are out there. We don't let it get too far down the line where we feel like, we've already been through 4 demos and then a trial. Sometimes we're calling stuff off the list, off of, just like Jess said, going to YouTube and seeing what the reviews are, and, you know, are those people like-minded, or are they accomplishing the same needs that we are?
Yeah, that's awesome. So that covers fit. I think, you know, like Dane said, it's a lot of this is the diligence on the front end. So this is kind of, I think, probably the earliest thing to evaluate when you're just thinking about bringing in new tech. So after that, I think the next piece that's nice to look at is everybody's favorite topic, budget. So, so one piece we wanted to include that's pretty timely is the Paycheck Protection Program funds that have recently released to a lot of different companies in the US, or PPP programming funds. You can actually use these for tech purchases now. So that's something we learned from a partner of ours just in discussion a few months ago. And I think it's really relevant for a lot of these construction companies who are looking to, you know, whether it's bringing in new tech to fix something that they've been struggling with, or whether it's something that they want to try out. They haven't always had, you know, that budget allocation to do so. And I think PPP funds recently being released to open up to tech is going to be helpful in letting a lot of these companies, a lot of you guys, you know, flex into different areas that you maybe haven't gotten to use before. So that's something to think about. I'm not an attorney and I do not work for the government. So we'll be sending out the links to a great article from Procore, and then also a link to the Small Business Administration's release that they did in March to get into the nitty-gritty of what you can buy and how you can use those funds and allocate them to tech. So the next thing on the list is spend, and I'm going to let Dane talk about how he evaluates these things in his organization.
Yeah, spend's certainly a tricky topic, or maybe I should say a touchy one for a lot of people. And, you know, I know as vendors and other, you know, people that are trying to sell their products, is probably the biggest thing that, you know, they probably get hit with outside of having time to implement systems. So as an organization, you know, there's some things we do every year early on throughout the whole process of evaluating technology implementation and purchasing of new technologies or systems or applications, is sit down and really review our budget. What are our operational goals for that year? And then what do we project our spend on something new is, and have we allocated a bucket of funds to doing that, or are we looking to, you know, augment something that we have in place? And so then we're evaluating a switch out and looking at things like that. So one of the biggest things that has been a valuable tool for me and for our organization and things that we look at is some outside reports that kind of help us set the benchmark on where are all the other companies, where's the industry average right now on spending on technology. So there's a Deloitte report that I use pretty frequently that I go to, that they update yearly, that analyze construction industry as a whole and what technology spend was as a function of gross revenue. So I think their figures are roughly around 2% of your gross revenue should be spent on technology. Now, I will preface that with saying, you know, and this kind of gets into the next point, as part of the budgeting, a lot of companies and a lot of people kind of lose sight of, all right, what am I spending on infrastructure and my needs to even have technology available versus the technology that I'm trying to purchase to push out for operational use are my systems and my application costs. So, you know, we have buckets that we've broken down as part of our budgeting process and our cost tracking metric is, you know, infrastructure, which, you know, includes hardware costs and system costs, servers costs, you know, cloud storage, everything that requires infrastructure, network delivery. So we break that out as a function of that, and then we look specifically at, all right, what applications, what operational tools, what's our spend on our, you know, systems and our applications on the face value. And, you know, I think one thing that I think Amanda's going to get into that, you know, kind of gets also lost a little bit in the budgeting and the spend phase is what it takes to make these things
absolutely. So you definitely want to consider kind of what other factors are going to come into play besides just the sticker price of the software you're looking at. So, think about, can you handle the process by yourself? Are you going to need to bring in an outside consultant to help you manage that process? And if so, is that within your budget? Is onboarding and training included in your package with the software? If so, how much, what kind, what resources are you going to have access to? Some tools do charge extra for training sessions. So you want to be sure that you understand, how much are you going to need? What is that cost going to be? And then kind of weigh that against potentially higher prices of a tool that actually includes everything. So just making sure that you are really, really knowing, what comes with your package. You might also want to think about how it's going to work with and complement other platforms that you either already use or you might adopt in the future. So, could it potentially replace something else that you pay for? Could it make the case for using other software later that it integrates with? So those are some things to kind of think about as well. And that brings us to implementation. So how do you find the time and resources to adopt new tools? Looking at the problems that software can solve is really exciting, but you have to be able to evaluate what it takes to get up and running. And Dane, I know you have a full implementation strategy for all of your tech. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen, through my experience is that, it's really easy to start implementing something, but it's hard to continue and to follow through with it. And I kind of identified that early on in kind of my evolution of our construction technology group, and decided that I would build some long-term strategies on how to do that. So the very first thing that I do, even in discovery, while we're vetting out what our needs are and everything, is we build an implementation strategy, or just a new technology strategy, which covers everything from pre-launch tasks of the technology, going through internal marketing, our training program, allocating resources to who's going to be involved in all of those, through any external comms that we may need, where our consultants fit into the mix, and then we usually close every single one of them out with a continuing education and a follow-up plan that says, all right, once I get my users involved in this technology, what am I going to do to sustain it long term? What are my KPIs, or what are my data analytics I want to get out of it once I start getting data in the system, and how do I continue to follow up with that? That is the very first thing that I do, and I don't like getting too far into any evaluation of technology or discussion of technology needs without one. And I think what's important with that is, as you build that out and you build your timeline and your strategy, you can set yourself up for some milestones, some measured mile items that you say, all right, we're 3 months into this, how do we look? Where were we on our strategy? And, we all know, as you start to put a system in place, or you try to launch some technology, you're going to hit roadblocks, you're going to hit stumbling blocks, you're going to have things that surprise you, and you're going to have to augment. And we try to take those opportunities to look at those measured milestones and go, okay, all right, we hit a roadblock here, so how do we adjust our strategy? Does our strategy need to change, or can we stay true to it and just make some few augmentations? Do I need to add some resources to get back on track or not? That is one of the big things that, I really look at, and I just, like construction, I don't like going into anything without a plan. And so some of that is adopted from my field days, but that's how we look at implementing technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of thinking about the plan as well, thinking long-term about your business plans, your goals, your needs. If you expect to be growing, you want to look for tools that are going to grow with you and that aren't going to kind of hold you back later if they don't have the capabilities you need. So, you can't anticipate everything, but you should definitely ask, how does the software treat updates? How does it handle customer feedback? You can even, ask directly, like how have other businesses like yours handled growth while using that particular tool? Just kind of feeling out if it feels likely that any concerns you have are going to be taken into consideration, if they are capable of growing with you. The last thing you need is to really get fully behind a tool and have it serve you now, but then you outgrow it and then have to go through discovery and onboarding again, in a couple of years. And then as far as project load, we saw in our survey data, a majority of people are expecting business to grow. So project loads are going to be increasing. So you really do want to think about practical things like, do you have time right now based on your current project load? Maybe there's, that seasonality that a lot of contractors experience. Maybe there's a better season that you can plan to implement a new tool. Does the software itself have a schedule in mind for customers like you, customers of your size in your trade that do what you do? Are they clear on what you should expect and how long things are going to take? And then really also thinking about, is it intuitive? Is it easy to use? Look at the interface, make sure it's something that you feel your team is going to kind of be able to grasp without making their day-to-day more complicated than it already is. Otherwise you won't be able to get that buy-in that you really need for your team to be successful.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. So the last slide is, I think, again, the biggest conversation starter for us when we're talking to prospects, and that's talking about ROI and, how to evaluate these things kind of close to the end. And I think thinking about that initially when you're in the discovery phase or when you just start talking to these different providers, reviewing what your expectations are going to be of your ROI is going to be really important. So one of the things that Amanda and I talked about, even when we were just thinking through what we wanted to discuss on today's session, was the ability for users, I think especially in construction, to see the product, to have some sort of testing period where they can see what is it going to look like within their team. So when you're looking at different platforms, if they give you the option to either run like a trial period, a pilot program, proof of concept, these are all terms that you need to bring up when you're talking to these software providers, because that gives you an opportunity to say, let's get this kind of short-term or mid-term goal of, we're going to take 90 days, we're going to run 1 to 2 things within this system, and we're going to see how it goes. I know Flashtract, that's something that we've done with certain users that, they have a project starting and we say, well, we'll run that project with you and we know you're going to like it. So let's let you see everything that you need to see. And I know a lot of providers do that in construction technology because we want to make sure that it works for everybody that's going to be using it. We don't want any bad experiences. I know Stack does a free trial as well, because we want to make sure that everybody working within the program understands what they're getting into and that they stick around. So I think asking those questions is really important up front. Can I run something like this? Or, you may be ready to pull the trigger and buy full time, but I think if you have hesitations or you want to make sure it's a fit, it's smart to ask that up front if you can run something like that. So from there, I think the most obvious one, but I think the most important one, is staying dedicated. So I'm going to pass to Dane to get him to give us his feedback on staying dedicated and, what to do after launch.
Yeah, I think I kind of hit on the measured milestones and the strategy, and I just really can't stress that enough. One of the things that I've found through the years is, one of the big things about staying dedicated is trying to push through the roadblocks. It's very easy to get user frustration or get stumbled up in the fact that you're putting some new technology in and you're living through a change management cycle that is often hard. And construction workers innately don't love change, or so I found out. So, we work really hard to try to, through that strategy, through our internal marketing, try to keep everything upbeat, positive, and try to crash through those roadblocks and keep trucking. And oftentimes we found if we stay true to our plan and we push a little harder and say no a few times and say, hey, no, we're not going to change the system. I really need you to try to adapt to, what it's asking you to do. And in 6 months, if it's still a problem, I'm going to come back and revisit it with you. And then we'll look at making a change then. But Avoiding the customization conversation is important, and trying to really, stay true to the strategy, stay true to your plan, bust through those roadblocks. That has been the biggest measure for us on something being successful long term. And luckily there's some great technology out there that doesn't have as many stumbling blocks, and there's others that, it's something new, so they do have some. And that's kind of my insight there. Really, that strategy is really my most that's my most important thing when I'm trying to stay dedicated. I'm frequently going back and reading that.
Yeah, I think that's important for sure. And I think, the after launch piece is important for everyone. It's this bum rush to the end of like implementation and launch. And I think it's important for, whomever chose the software to come in, whomever was that internal champion that we talked about earlier, making sure, that group of people is regularly checking in with the team that's having to use it and making sure you're still like finding measurable success within the new process. I think that's helpful in, whether it's renewing your contract whenever that comes up with whatever you've purchased, or whether it's, figuring out, we really like these aspects of it, but we'd like to see these other things. I know I can speak for us, and I can speak for every construction technology company we work with. All those companies, we all want that kind of feedback. So, it's a good thing to be checking in regularly. It only makes your experience better. And it makes, I think, the overall construction technology landscape, it becomes a lot better, and it becomes, more functionally service-based for the users versus just like a static piece. We're constantly changing. That's the nice thing about technology. So that's all we have. That was a lot of really good information. I think that we touched on a lot of the things that, we get questions about at Flashtract. I know Stack gets these questions all the time. Dane asks these questions all the time as a practitioner. And so I think it's good information to have. I hope it was helpful for everybody in attendance. If you guys have any questions following up, my email address is listed here, and Amanda's is as well. We did get a couple of questions during the session, and I'm going to the summation of those were really two big things, and they were for Dane, of course, because he's the knower of all construction technology things. The biggest one was what's the hardest part of the process? Like if you had to pick, like when you realize you guys have a gap and you're like, all right, we need something to solve this. From that start to like implementation, what is the most difficult thing to do?
Agreeing on what our business process and what our needs truly are. That is the most difficult when you get diverse perspectives, and you want that, and you want, our culture is our employees are empowered to do their job, and we want ownership and buy-in. That's what makes us great. And with that, you get a lot of very adamant demands of, I need this, I need that, and sometimes they don't align all across the board. So getting that aligned and saying, all right, these are at the core, these are real needs, and this is the real business process we want this to run through. That tends to be the most difficult. It's kind of a mixture of behavioral, and I know that doesn't seem like important to technology, but it absolutely is, because, like you all know, y'all are wizards behind that keyboard, and y'all can make the technology do whatever it is we want it to do. But if you don't know what the plan is and what we really need, it makes your job a lot harder, and you're guessing, and then we get in, you get in trouble.
Yeah, it's what is the old saying? It's at the very beginning, it's like herding cats. You got to get everybody on the same page. All right.
And then
cool.
implementation's like pushing a rope. Yeah.
Oh, that's really fun. I'm going to definitely include that in our wrap up specifically for the day. All right. So the next question, and I think this gets into more of the tech side of things again for Dane, is what like red flags do you see or do you look for? Like, what do you know to look for? What would you recommend other people when they're about to start this process? Like what to watch out for?
Say that again.
So like red flags in the process, like if you had to give our listeners advice on like what do they need to be hyper aware of? Make sure you ask this thing, or make sure you're looking out for this. What would it be?
Yeah, ease of use is like one of the biggest things I ask around for. If I start to hear that Yeah, it's a great tool, but it's pretty, like, you really got to spend some time, like, that's a red flag for me, specifically for our user group. Depending on the technology, of course, and
Okay.
what you're trying to accomplish, but that ease of use is a big one. Client feedback, so I work really hard to find out, and I'll challenge the vendors, all right, give me the list of contractors, or give me the list of companies that you do business with, and let me have a contact. And then I'll try to dig a little deeper beyond what they give me, because they're going to give me their champions, and see if I can't find some people that didn't make the list, and then call them and say, all right, hey, I'm looking at X, Y, and Z, and, can you give me some real feedback? And I look for that. If they don't offer a lot of companies or some, things like that, it's something to look for, but I don't really stress about that as much anymore. But, and then if they don't offer a trial, or they don't seem hands-on about training or implementation, that's a pretty big red flag to me. I won't get very far with someone who's not willing to demo, give us some leeway to figure out if it's a true fit into our organization. That's a pretty big red flag for us.
Those are good ones. Cool. So we had another question come in that I think is pretty good because of the landscape that we're dealing with right now. So Dane, what do you think about all-in-one solutions, like, the big super Maya Procore versus like point solutions, like more individual problem-solving solutions?
I have a complex relationship with that question. I think so. From an organization and from a standardization standpoint, the all-in-one solutions do offer giant benefits, but you don't always get what you really need, what really matches your values. You might only be getting 70% or 60% or something. And while that checks some boxes for standardization, that's not always what's best for the user group or what's best for the organization. So I think that's where these point solutions come into play. And if I find a really great point solution that's really good at one thing, and it's super easy to use, and we have user buy-in, and it's got limited implementation time, we'll get really excited about that. Externally, for our users, we'll get excited for it. Internally, I get a little, knots in my stomach, because then we usually have to try to make it talk to something. So then you have the integration conversation, and what can I do with that point solution, with potentially tying it to an all-in-one, or to an ERP, or to something where I really need to get data out of it. And that's obviously, I think most people recognize that's the way of the future, or that's how everything is moving, and you want that. But I like both for different reasons. We have both, not Procore, but we have an all-in-one solution, and we have point solutions that we've attached, and that we have that augment certain processes. And that's the way we attack it. And I think a lot of companies find themselves in that boat for that exact same reason.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out with, integrations and connectivity. I know Amanda touched on that when we were talking through the slides. That's a non-starter for a lot of people that we talk with. We integrate with pretty much anybody that we would need to, but that's one of the first questions that comes up is always, well, I have this, can you work with them? And I think, as point solution providers, it's our duty to kind of make sure that we're connecting the right way to prevent a waste of time, because the whole point of all of us existing is to save everybody time, make efficiencies, and make their lives better while they're at work. So yeah, I think that's a good call out. And also make sure you're asking your potential tech providers that as you guys go through your evaluation process.
Yeah, I'll add something there, Jess, if you want me to. One thing that I've found, we've looked at, outside of building like a true integration, through third-party software or something that's point-to-point to get data back and forth, we've found that sometimes there are point solutions that are so valuable or so useful that we're okay with swivel sharing that integration, doing a flat file transfer, or looking for alternatives with potentially resources, because it offers that much value. And those exist. I think y'all are potentially one of them out there that are really good at that, and there's several others. And so we've done that through a few things where it's the point solution's gotten so much value, we're okay with just standing it up on by itself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that compliment. That was nice of you. Yeah, those are all the questions that we had. I think, those last couple answers were really good. I knew you were going to deliver some good stuff, and you definitely did. So we appreciate you coming in as our resident construction technology expert. And Amanda, I really appreciate you jumping in today. And I think the survey results were awesome to get to review. Like I said, everybody on the call, you'll be getting follow-up. A recording of our session today. We'll be talking about and linking to all the resources that we've reviewed and discussed, including Dane's budget link that he talked about getting from Deloitte. I think that's crazy helpful for everybody. So all the things we discussed, you'll be getting links to. So we hope this was helpful. If you have any ideas or any follow-up questions, feel free to email us. We'll get back to you, and it can help us and inspire new ideas for content to help you guys as you go through your tech process. So that's all for now. Again, I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks to Dane and Amanda, and we'll see you guys next time. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.